Everybody that's listening, if you're listening as a first time on the radio, we greatly appreciate that on one of the 25 radio stations around the country. Very appreciative, as I just said, to have you listening. And hopefully you continue listening. We've got a lot of great guests coming up as the election goes into high gear. And even after the election, we'll be obviously talking about God knows what's going to happen after that, but we will be talking about that and the turmoil ahead. But anyways, we'll move forward for the people listening to us on the podcasting site, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. The list goes on and on. We're grateful for you guys too. And if you could, do that, like, subscribe, and share, we would appreciate that because that helps us get to more people as possible. We want to get to the most people as possible. In general, we have a very special guest. It's Michael A. Letts. He's the founder and president and CEO of Invest USA. We're going to be talking about his company, police in general, defund the police, and all the other craziness going on in the country and in the world today. So, Michael, enough of me rambling and running my mouth. Thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Well, Robert, thank you for what you're doing for the country, for America. We're in some very precarious times, and you are
Yeah.
ensuring that the truth is known, and nothing more can be asked of that. And I'm honored to be a guest on your show today.
Well, Michael, just a little background because I know we're meeting right now virtually for the first time. I used to be very far to the left before COVID-19. And I know a lot of people listening know this story. So if you know it, just kind of bear with us as I tell Michael a little bit about my story as we weave into the interview. I was a Bernie Sanders guy in college. I'm in Florida. I worked for Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. The list goes on, being surrounded by these Democrat politicians. And then COVID came upon us. And as myself and many other people kind of woke up, my waking up call, Michael, was due to getting injured by the jab, we'll call it, because we don't want to get censored on the radio or on the internet.
Right.
And then I just saw, Michael, we'll get your opinion on this before we start talking about the company, invest.org. My issue was, Michael, that a lot of people woke up and a lot of the people that were conservative that I was told to hate, they were the ones that were saying what I was going through rather was legitimate. What I was going through was real. And the people that were on the left side, they were the ones making fun of me, gaslighting me, and acting like what I was going through that was some fake fantasy world thing. So, and this does go into what you deal with the police and fire. More so, obviously, the police, because these are the men and women that were getting fired because they stood up and said, listen, we're not going to take this experimental medical treatment. We are going to worry about our bodies and not take this. So, before we even get into the company, talk a little bit about that and in 2020, where you were at in general when the jab came on the scene.
Well, it's interesting that I very much appreciate your comments, and it's interesting the players that you just talked about. I happen to know them all well. I know
Yeah.
Obama, I know Michelle, I know Hillary. Had pictures, was up at the White House with Bill quite often. Uh, but here's where we're at. It's just what you said. When COVID began to become an issue, of course, I couldn't see a whole lot of difference between that and the flu. I'm just being very blunt with you. I couldn't see much of a difference. So I resented the fact that we were being told as public servants, you have no option, no choice. See, what people don't understand about with my involvement with law enforcement, and I've done it for over 30 some odd years, I come from a little unique situation, Robert. It's not just law enforcement. I've been a firefighter, EMS. I've done the whole gamut. And fortunately for me, my family has been around for the 1600s in South Carolina, a land grant from England. And so we have vast real estate holdings, and consequently, we have trust, family trust. So my position from day one, when I was in college, much less after that, is I'm happy to assist and I'm happy to help with law enforcement and work in law enforcement, et cetera. But there's only one condition. I even served in public office on council for 30 years. If you feel the need to pay me, you could just collect your checks at the end of the day and put it back into the treasury. I will accept no compensation. I said, and the reason why I won't do that is because that way you don't tell me what to do. You don't control me. If I have an opinion, I will express it. If you don't like it, and you want to disassociate yourself with me, you have that option. You do not have the option to say, I'm taking your livelihood away from you if you don't do what you're told. So you have to understand that mind thing. That's how it started. And then when they begin to say, okay, as public servants, public officials, law enforcement, firefighters, etc., we expect you to bear the banner, is what they would say, and you all have to be vaccinated to show that this is something that's needed from a public health perception. And my response was, you haven't tested it enough. How do I know what the ramifications are? It's not that I'm against medicine or against science, as you constantly would criticize me for. It's I want to know. There's literally no way you're going to convince me that you know the ramifications when it's been a matter of 12 months that you developed this thing.
Right.
There's no way. So here was my response all across the country, because I was on shows all across the country, because I was the only one that could speak out. Nobody else could do that. I say, you're not going to take my guys and gals and make them human guinea pigs. We're just not going to do it. Maybe, it's not that we're trying to be hard to get along with. It's just that we don't know the ramifications. And of course, Robert, since then, we have discovered that there are tremendous ramifications to that.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for the position that we took, but I'm also heartbroken over many of my brothers and sisters, whether it was law enforcement, human health services, nurses, etc., who were basically told, you do it or you are on the streets. They had young families. They couldn't afford not to, and they sacrificed their well-being. Some of them are great. Okay. Some of them took it, no effects. Some of them took it and lost their lives.
Yeah.
Some of them took it and have dramatic effects that they're still dealing with. And Robert, that's just absolutely asinine to ask a person to do that, to violate his own will and conscience. You decide for yourself, between you, your doctor, your God. You make the decision what needs to be best for you. And the government just keeps its nose out of it, because never once could they prove to me in all the debates I had across the country. I will use myself as an example. I don't have it, don't have any symptoms. You're telling me I may be a carrier and don't know it? Well, I'm sorry. I may be a carrier of a lot of things and don't know it. But quite frankly, until you prove to me that there is some way that you can directly correlate, I am hurting the public by either not having the vaccine. Of course, I wouldn't wear the mask either. I mean, I said any jackass would know that a little piece of paper over your lips is not going to do anything. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to comply with something that makes no sense. And you never could show me that my not complying was a detriment to the health of the general public. And of course, like I said, now that we know the facts, thank God we took that position.
Everybody was in the hysteria. I wish I was like you. I was very much brainwashed. I call it the liberal hysteria. It's very unfortunate, Mike, that we have to bring this into political ways, that this was a big political thing. Because in the end, it should have been about health. Correct. And not about politics, not if you were a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter at the time. I laugh, and we can end on this and move forward, Mike, because if you remember during, I believe it was the first debate between Trump and Biden, that Biden and Harris said, if the vaccine comes out and Trump is the president, we don't recommend you take it. Correct. But all of a sudden, the election, whatever we believe about what happened there, we'll just keep it at that, goes a different way, and Trump is out of power, and Biden goes into the White House. All of a sudden, that same vaccine is all of a sudden God's gift to the world. Very strange how all this stuff was manipulated. And again, a lot of people weren't like you. They just didn't see it. They were brainwashed. The fear was out of control in this country, that if you stepped out of the house, you were going to drop dead in 10 seconds. If you didn't wear 1 mask, 2 masks, 3 masks, you would have been dead. And that's just the way it was talked about. It's unfortunate, but that's the way the cookie crumbled. And I do hope people keep speaking about this, Mike, like we are, because they took away your jobs. They took away your freedom. They injured people. People died from this, whether it was from the jab, whether it was from also just people getting this and dying. This was a manipulated virus. I'm sorry. It's just the way the cookie crumbles now. And people need to stop saying, oh, it was 4 years ago. So what? They did it once, they're going to do it again. And
They've
people
already
need to. I'm
indicated.
grateful I woke up. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, they've already indicated they're going to do it again. That
Right,
is
right.
what we are facing in the upcoming election. Is a matter of, do we believe in value and principle? And value and principle means that you make the determination based on law and order what is best for you, not the government telling you to do so. Or have we gotten to the point in this country to where you just will bow down and do anything you're mandated to do? I'm sorry, that's not the blood that flowed through my forefathers' veins, and it's certainly not the blood I think that flows through most American veins. Now that they realize this is what's at stake, I see a great awakening across this country. People are saying, whoa, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather die as a free man standing than to live on my knees before a servanthood to a government that's tyrannical and telling me what to do. And they're just not going to do it anymore.
Yeah. Again, for people listening, this is Michael A. Letts. He's the founder and president and CEO of Invest USA. It is InvestUSA.org, and it also, for on the Twitter, I should say, it is, the website is InvestUSA.org. I want to get into the interview, Mike, because I think it's important to. I know we went off a little bit off target, and I like to
All
talk
come
about that
together.
because, listen, Mike, this is the real story of what's going on in America. And
Right.
since it affected me a lot, and I know it affected a lot of your brothers and sisters, we need to keep this story alive. It's not just about Trump and Harris, it's about what the hell happened in
Right.
this country the past 4 years. And again, as we just talked about, if they did it once, they're going to do it again. And just kind of put the exclamation point on this, they just came out today and said, monkeypox is back. You got to worry about the monkeypox. So it's just a big scam. I'm sorry. We're not playing this game again. At
Right.
least I'm not. Let's move into the interview with this. So, what made you want to start Invest USA? I know you were involved with the police, but this is a whole different take on it.
Well, here's how it started, to give you the brief overview.
Sure.
Is in 1993, I told you you know, have experience in the Guard, military experience. But besides that, I also part of a family real estate trust. So part of a real estate trust, when you talk about something about an operation that big, Donald Trump will tell you the same. I happen to know Donald very well. And politics plays a big part in real estate development because the government controls what permits you do, don't get, whether you can or can't build. Everything's regulated. So my grandfather was a commissioner for the county for 50 years in office. So I chose the same path. I served on council to begin with. Well, one of the key things when you're in public office is you want to make sure you get around. You want to make sure you meet as many people and you involve as much as you can in the community. I was president of a Kiwanis club. One of the things about being the president is you have to have the speakers to show up every week. Well, night before, one of them couldn't make it, so I called the sheriff, who was a friend of mine, and said, "Send me a deputy, or he could clean his gun for all I care, but I need a speaker for first thing early morning breakfast a meeting." He did. In the question and answer, somebody said, "Where's this vest we've been hearing about? There had been a shooting a few weeks back." And I was shocked to hear him say, "Well, the department doesn't provide them." I thought maybe he was just new and didn't know. So we sent him over to the Rotary Club and he gave the same speech, same question, same answer. So I called the sheriff. I said, "Look, I don't want to get your boy in trouble, but he says you don't have vests." He said, "That's true. You've never been able to get them funded by council." So I'm young and naive, when you first get involved in public service, you think you can change the world. So I said, "No problem. I've got that fixed for you." Well, we got $500,000 put into the budget. I was out of town on third reading. I had a meeting I had to be out of town on. So when I get back, this is back in the days when you had answer machines with a little red flashing light. And
Yes.
my answer machine was full and it was all from reporters. Would you care to comment about your colleague removing the $500,000 on third reading? Well, I did something politicians are not supposed to do. I spoke without thinking. I just said, well, fine. If they feel that way about it, we'll just raise the money. And of course, that was the headlines the next day. And quite frankly, we went from doing that county. Once we got done with our county, I announced that we had completed the mission. We were shutting it down. And I had so many calls from other counties and other states surrounding South Carolina saying, would you take on just one more AG? Would you help just one more? Quite frankly, Robert, we can't find an exit strategy. It's been 30 years and still can't find an exit strategy. So that's how we started to invest. And we served, and the reason why I'm mentioning all this is because it was not only just beginning to provide them with protective vests to make sure that they could come back safely to their families, but suddenly it realized that what we talked about when we first started this interview, they didn't have a voice. And the reason why they didn't have a voice is because, they're paid by the taxpayers and they work for the chiefs, the sheriffs, etc. So you can't say what's on your mind or you get fired. So I quickly realized that I could serve not just making sure they're protected, but serve as a voice, spokesman, as a voice for the needs that they really have and for their real concerns. We've been doing that ever since, and it has just skyrocketed and grown. Why has it skyrocketed and grown so much? Because the current policies of this administration and previous administrations have caused violent crime to spiral, to spike. It has, caused defunding the police. It has destroyed the thin blue line. And now I have people on the streets that stop me. I mean, I can't go anywhere anymore without getting stopped. And I'm scared to go to the grocery store. I'm scared to go to the mall. And I'm sitting there thinking, folks, we don't live in Sudan. We don't live in a third world country. This is America, supposed to be the greatest country in the world. And you're telling me you're scared to go outside your door? That has to change, Robert. It has to change. It has changed now. And it's the policies that are causing this. So we have to change our policies.
I'll tell you what, with this administration, the American flag should be upside down. It's an SOS right now. And again, if we don't get the right person in, whether it's got to be Trump, obviously. I'm a Kennedy guy, but I do like President Trump as well. And this is a guy that I didn't like before 2020.
Right.
But regardless of that, it's really an SOS for this country. And let's talk about the defunding the police, since you just brought that up, Michael. So, we heard this, and a lot of these people, I was a big fan at the time. I was very brainwashed in the liberal hysteria with the squad, with the Ilhan Omar, the Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Jamal Bowman, the list goes on and on of that group. They were pushing that as far as that goes. Some of them have already been voted out this year. Some of them are still in the game in Congress. When we talk about defund the police and we see what's going on in the big cities around the country, specifically New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, it's really a joke of what's going on in our country. Again, as you said, people can't walk the streets. Not even just that, we have homeless people all over the place. We're giving money to Ukraine, Israel, but we can't even take care of our own house. It's really disgusting. So when you're talking to the cops in South Carolina, but not to mention South Carolina, around the country that you deal with, what are they saying about these resources that are being reallocated to other services, and the safety is going extremely down in their cities and states?
Well, I think you hit on a very key component here, Robert. Here is what the sad situation is. We have politicians who are more concerned about staying in office, staying in power, wanting to make sure that they can control the American people than they care about the American people. Why would I make such a statement? Just some of the things you said. We can find billions of dollars to send to Ukraine, to even help them secure their borders, but could do absolutely nothing to secure ours. And we know when we're talking about securing ours, it's not just a phrase, secure our borders. Look at what the result of not securing them are. We have millions of terrorists. And hey, just a couple of days ago, Robert, I'm giving you statistics that media doesn't like to report on. A couple of days ago, we picked up 9 Iranian terrorists that were crossing into the border. 9. Take the ones that we didn't get. Now, here's what I tell people. These were 9 Iranians, were not people that we think could be terrorists. We have documentation. We've already engaged them one time on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay, they're part of ISIS. They're part of the Taliban. So we know what their intent is. Trust me, they've taken shots at us. So
well, also, Michael, just to interject very quickly, what about all the Chinese men that are of fighting age that are coming out? They are infiltrating this country. It's not just China. It's Iran, it's Afghanistan, it's Iraq. They're not just seeing it in this country. They're seeing it in England, where they're having issues with the Muslims raping The girls, again, we're not trying to say that every Muslim person is a rapist or they're hurting people. We're just stating the facts of what's going on right now in England. But this is going to happen, and it's already happened in this country, where we saw the nurse in Georgia that got raped and murdered, the 13-year-old girl a couple weeks back, raped and murdered. And these people are vicious, and the cartel is helping them out, get into the country. And this is an infiltration. This country is going down from within, not from outside.
Well, Robert, you raise a great point. You know, it's interesting. This has been predicted for some time. You know, President Lincoln, one of his famous speeches, always said that, you know, all the armies of Europe combined could never drink from the Mississippi. If America is to fall, it's to fall from within, not from without. And we are seeing that over 150 years later, that prophecy being fulfilled. And quite frankly, here are some statistics your listeners need to know. You mentioned about the cartels. Well, let me just tell you some, because I've also been involved in the intelligence community. And here's the intelligence is just coming out. We have cartel activity now in every state of America, of the Union, all 50 states. The cartels are present in every state of America. They're present in every major municipality. And here's something that has never occurred before. They are now partnering with each other. In the old days, you know, you had one gang, turf wars, fighting together, they were killing each other off because they wanted to see you dominate. Not anymore. They are in a very tight partnership and a business arrangement from one gang to the next. They now have Tierra de Agua, which is out of Venezuela. And there are others, MS-13 and others, that we now from intelligence have found that they are engaged with foreign adversaries like Iran and others, taking money from them. And what are they taking the money for? They have one goal in mind. They have been ordered to kill and ambush as many law enforcement officers as possible. Not just, hey, if we happen to be stealing and you happen to come upon us, then we get involved in a gun battle. No, their goal now is I'm going to hunt you down. You're wearing a badge, I'm going to find you, and I'm going to eliminate you if at all possible. That is what we are facing. You mentioned about the over 60,000 Chinese young men that are here. I've been on the borders, okay? I can tell you from the people that we have stopped and talked to, not just Chinese, Venezuelan, Iranian, and others, that as we begin to discuss with them, they have shown me their active military ID cards. They're not just young men of military age. These are military personnel from China, from Venezuela. I've seen their cards. I've seen their ID cards from their foreign military operations. They're pouring across the border. What's happening to them? Well, let me tell you what this administration is doing. They come across, you and I as taxpayers fund where to put them, where to send them, how to feed them, and how to house them. And here's what they say when I get so frustrated. They'll come back and tell you, we don't know where they're at. That is bull, Robert. I've been in the intelligence community. We know where every one of them is at. We just don't have the will. We have the capacity, but we don't have the will to remove them. You say, why don't we? Because if we did that, Robert, here's what the occurrence is. I have to admit that open borders is the wrong policy then for this country. I can't do that. You say, why are open borders so important? Because by having open borders, I'm bringing across millions of people that I can now utilize their information for mail-in ballots or ballot stuffing. I know they don't like to hear this, but the evidence is there. We know it's there. They have used it repeatedly to make sure they maintain power, and they're not about to let that go. So the point is back to where we're circling back around to what you and I just talked about. They're more interested in maintaining power and in controlling the American people than they are of meeting the needs and taking care of the American citizen. And America is becoming keenly aware of that, and they're revolting against it.
But is it really about votes, just that? Because, you know, I see it almost reminds me of spiritual warfare going on in this country. If you're a Christian and you believe in the Bible, you read the Bible, you can see these issues happening in the Bible. Sure. And there's all this satanic behavior going on in this country, around the world. We talked about open borders. We haven't spoken about this, but this is very much in the satanic behavior with the trans agenda, with the men and women sports, which we saw in the Olympics. We saw the trans agenda in the Olympics. You know, in the sex trafficking, again, which you just spoke about with the border, is out of control right now. No However, again, I bring this back to the jab, because it seems like the government is definitely in on the satanic agenda, because we look at what happened with the jab. Again, police, fire, military had to get the jab or else they lose their job. A lot of these men and women got the jab again, and they got injured. They passed away. So that's going on right now, Michael. And my question is, with that happening, in the injuries, with the disabilities, not just with the fire, police, and military, with just a regular working citizen that's injured or passed away due to the jab. And they're bringing all these new people. It's almost like, and you seem like you're a history buff, we're bringing this back to the times of the serf. These
Correct.
people coming in don't believe in freedom and democracy. They don't know that this country is a republic.
That's
So
correct.
they're just coming in, and the people that are the powers that be, that run the country, that run the world, it is a new world order. It is open borders for all countries, and they can manipulate these people because they're not as smart as the citizens of the United States. No matter whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, or Native American, you grew up with these freedoms. These people coming in from the third world nations, they don't know the word. They don't even know what the word freedom means.
No, you're exactly right. And to tie it all in, let me kind of put a bow on what we're talking about here. Yes, it is about elections because they have to maintain power if they're going to be able to enforce. But that is not their only objective. You hit on a very crucial point. They are, it is truly a pinnacle battle between good versus evil. And they are evil. They're nefarious. Their goal and objective is to destroy America. Why are they so interested in destroying America? Because America is the only thing that stands between them and world dominance. They want one world government. This is not conspiracy. They want world government. They want to control you. Well, it's hard to control somebody that's armed. They found that out the hard way. And so this whole defund the police, it did not just happen. It is all a well-orchestrated movement. It's been going on for decades. And how did their movement work? Well, initially they thought they could control Congress. This is back in the 60s and the 70s, that we'll just get people elected to Congress and we're going to pass gun control. Well, guess what? Didn't work too well because the American people said, I hear you, but no, you're not taking my gun away. So they decided they would have to find a different avenue to be able to disarm the American people. So they came up with a plan called, defund the police. But how did they implement that? Well, that wasn't just going to happen. People didn't just jump on that idea. Initially, they created an issue, the George Floyd, and they got the mainstream media to go along and buy in with them. And here's the perception that they gave. Folks, law enforcement is bad. Law and order is bad. These are racist people. These are people that will just brutalize you. They are not worthy of respect. And then they compounded that by starting the George Floyd, the riots. And notice this is what Tim did. Tim was the governor right now of Minnesota. He's Kamala's, vice presidential running mate. So when they begin to have these riots, here's what so irks me about Tim, how well they planned themselves to doing this. This did not happen happenstance. This was a well-orchestrated movement. They made sure that mainstream media got plenty of pictures of law enforcement standing row by row, watching the city burn. Now, here's what the natural reaction to the American people be. Well, if that's all they're going to do, then why are we paying them? They're not worth anything if they're not going to protect the people, if they're not going to do anything. So we should defund them. What the American people didn't know is they had been ordered by Tim. They were frustrated that day. They had been ordered by the governor, by Tim, to stand down. They were not allowed to do their job and engage. But it created an atmosphere to the American people that, well, maybe we should defund them. If they're not going to work, why are we paying them anyway? And so this whole process began. Why was it so important to defund the police? Because here's what they wanted to do. They knew two things. By defunding the police and causing us to be jabbed, as you said, losing officers that way, losing them by not funding them, by not providing them equipment, causing their forces to drop drastically, which is where we're at now. When we started this process, Robert, we had 1.3 million officers across the country. We have around 700,000 now, almost half. That's how badly it has dropped. And they realized that when that happened, violent crime would spike. Okay, we start going up. People would be fearful. Now, they learned a lesson during COVID-19. They learned that people respond to fear. They will give up rights and all kinds of things they never thought about doing when they're fearful. So they figured they would get you in a fearful mood about going outside for your own safety. Then they would come back and say, you know what? Local and state has demonstrated they can't handle this job. But never fear, your federal government is here. We're going to step in and we're going to bring this violent crime under control. Now, they've already stated what they're going to do with it. They're already on public record. And what is their public record? Violent crime is caused by guns, not by the people that use the guns. It's caused by guns. So they've already lined up. They begin to get the budgets in Congress. I need another 83,000 IRS armed IRS agents. Whoever thought you need to carry a firearm to say, Robert, you put your decimal in the wrong place, but I'm loaded and ready to go because of the fact you put that decimal. Whoever thought about that? There's a reason why they do this. People understand why you talk about federal officers. Let me tell you something if you've been involved on the federal level like I have. Local police, you and I go to the same church together, Robert. We go to Walmart together, okay? I know you, and I'm not going to do anything to violate your rights. When it comes to the feds, if I say I want to work for the feds, where you at? South Carolina? Okay, I'm moving you to California. Why do they do that? Because they want me to have no family. They want my family to be the federal government, the people that tell me what to do. So they disassociate me with everyone. That's how they work. That's their operation. So now once they say, okay, this is your family, and I'm telling you to go take Robert's gun, it doesn't bother me any. I don't have any association with you. I don't feel bad about it. I'm just executing the orders that I've been given. That's what they're attempting to do. And that's how we've gotten to this point in this country. And it's a very horrible place to be in. And it's time that we decide we're not going to take it anymore. We do something different.
Michael A. Letts, again, he is the founder and CEO of Invest USA. It is investusa.org, investusa.org. On Twitter, it is investusa.org again. I want to talk about this, and we're going to get into some audience questions, Mike, here.
Sure.
Just to kind of just put the exclamation point on what you said, Tim Walz had a Gestapo during 2020 where people were just on their porches minding their own business because they locked down the whole damn place, and they were shooting paintballs at people on their own property, on their own porches. Really disgusting. And again, that is what people are worried about. That is why people need their firearms, just in case the government and the police go rogue. And those police are following orders from, again, the powers that be above them. And this Governor Tim Walz in that case. So really disgusting as far as that goes. I want to get into these audience questions a few are on the company and a few are on kind of some of the stuff that we just were talking about, or I should say you were speaking about. New York City, obviously the place is like a cesspool, one of the most beautiful cities in the world before probably the past 5 to 8 years. With that said, we have a police chief that is mayor. I know people that are living in New York City, they are not really excited about the man that used to be, I believe he was a sergeant. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I know Eric well. Yep.
Okay, regardless of that, there are people that are very not, and I think he's trying to teeter the line of how to help the police, but also galvanize the left. I want you to go more in depth about Mr. Adams because you said you know him personally, and it seems like he is teetering that line, and a lot of people are not very enthusiastic about his leadership the past few years.
I'll tell you what I tell Eric every time we talk. I loved you as a cop, Eric. I hate you as a mayor. You are a lousy politician. You are a good cop. And you have mixed the two together, and they don't mix. Here's what you need to be. You are so concerned about pandering to what is politically correct. And quite frankly, the majority of your people don't even support you anymore. I hate to tell you, but when it comes to re-election time, I wouldn't want to be on your re-election committee. Because I really think that people of New York have had it. They've had enough. But you have this distinct group that are pushing and pushing, that are trying to make you think that they speak for all the New Yorkers when they don't. And they're pushing you to these progressive ideas. They want more cooperation is what the word they use for criminals. They want them better protected. They want more progressive ideas. When actually is all the New Yorkers want, because I've been up there quite a few times, they just want to feel safe again. They want to feel like their freedoms are protected. And Eric, you're doing them a disservice by lining up with the progressives instead of backing your people. Back law enforcement, and they will make sure. Rudy Giuliani did it. I mean, he turned the city around because he got behind law enforcement. People begin to respect it, begin to feel safe and comfortable, and the city boomed. You're doing
Listen, when Giuliani was there, Mike, and also Bloomberg, they had stop and frisk. I know the progressives don't like that. I know a few black people that live in the city that were stopped and frisked. And you know what? Both of them said they were damn happy with being stopped and frisked. The city was ran real well at that time. The crime rate was low. They'd go back to that 100 times over. And these are from people that were stopped and frisked. And they said what the city looks like now is a joke. They'd gladly go back to doing that.
You know, and I tell Eric, this is the problem that you have. The Supreme Court has ruled that your termination of those law enforcement officers because of their refusal to accept the vaccine was unconstitutional. Hire them back. You know, that was what, a year and a half ago that ruling came? He hadn't done it yet. See, here's the problem that we're having. And we're talking with either Eric or whether we're talking about Joe at the White House or Kavanaugh, whoever we're talking about. This ideology, for some reason, seems to resonate that I don't care what the Constitution says. I don't care what your judicial says. If I like your law, I'm going to back it. If I don't like it, I'm going to ignore it. You don't have law and order if that's the case, because man is subjective. They may decide today it's a good law, tomorrow they think it's not. You cannot build a society on that kind of a principle.
Yeah. You know, another few audience questions, but we're going to combine this into one. Guns in schools. And you kind of tapped onto this, that it's not the gun that kills people, it's the person that's behind the gun that's killing the people. I'm with you on that. And we see this in Florida where they have either certified teachers that are, you know, using guns to make sure that there's no hanky-panky going on in the schools. They also have resource officers, or they have, again, people that were in the military past that know how to work guns. I'm totally behind that law in general by Governor DeSantis, who has been a great governor for our state. Regardless of that, a lot of these kids that are committing these crimes and shooting up the schools, they are very heavily medicated, Michael, with these antidepressants, these benzodiazepines. That's never spoken about. It's just they're white men. Who gives a damn about their race? Let's talk about why these people are being pushed with antidepressants and benzodiazepines. Do you agree with me on this?
Oh, wholeheartedly. Let's carry this a step further, Robert. Let's take a look at what fell apart, what went wrong. In the 60s, we had the big cases, you know, separation of church and state. Now, here's how they interpreted that. You know, the school system said, oh, well, if you say thou shalt not kill, that must obviously be part of church. So we're going to abandon any principles and values in school. Everything is immoral. There is no right and wrong. And so here's what happened. You begin to teach kids there is no right or wrong. Everything is subjective. They begin to realize quickly on their own, that's not how society works. That produces more depression, more frustration. Imagine growing up and never knowing what your boundaries are, never knowing what's right and wrong. So, of course, they're going to get depressed. Of course, they're going to be lethargic, not knowing what direction to take. So what do we do in society? Well, we don't deal with the source of the problem. Let's have values and principles for kids. Let's figure out some drug to give them so that they don't feel that way. Well, guess what? There are side effects of drugs. Maybe you don't feel that way, but you don't feel any way anymore. You're just doped out, walking around, not knowing where you're at. And that is where we've lost it. That is where we fell down. And now when the roosters come back to roost, suddenly we begin to look at, you know, what's going on? Well, it's very easy what's going on. We never trained kids with any values or principles. We gave drugs because they couldn't figure out, if you don't know what's going on, then how am I supposed to know what's going on? They were despaired. They lost hope. Instead of fixing the problem, we doped them up instead. And then we wonder how come they have the problems that we have now and them responding to the way they do when they're on these drugs. It's a very simple fix. It's a very simple how we do it. It comes back to common sense, Robert. I don't know how else to put it. We've lost common sense and decency in this country. We don't have it anymore.
I agree 100%. Again, Michael A. Letts, he's the founder and president of Invest USA. It's investusa.org on Twitter. It is InvestUSA.org. As we keep going through these audience questions, because we did get a lot for you, let's go into about the vests. So how much do these vests cost to make?
Well, let's define what we're talking about, Robert. Again,
Sure.
I'd love to have your viewers educated. When we started in 1993, 52% of cops had no protection at all, no vest. Understand at the time, the only thing that was available is what we call a concealable vest. That's the one you see under my shirt, okay? That's the one that is 27 to 32 layers of Kevlar, the tightly woven fabric. But the only thing it is designed to do is to stop a pistol, a sidearm. It will not stop anything else. So we had 52% of cops that had no protection at all. We got that down to roughly 19%. Then about a little over a decade ago, the cartels started exploding because of open borders and other things like that. And so once the cartels got involved, they were smart enough to know, you know what? I'm not going to shoot you with a pistol. I'm going to shoot you with a long range rifle because it'll go right through that vest, cut through it just like butter. So we had to stop and recreate new technology called active shooter vests. The vest you see on the outside, you see one right behind me. It's got my police vest on it. That's an active shooter vest. It's got titanium plates in it. It will stop anything. Okay, rifle, pistol, it'll stop it all. But unfortunately, Robert, 90% of officers on the street don't have it. It's new technology and they can't afford it. Asking your question, it runs roughly about $700 a piece to put them in an active shooter vest. Now, here's what breaks my heart.
Well, they're defunding the budget, so how can people afford it?
Exactly. They're funding the budget, so they're not giving it that. And then, but yet they'll turn around and take that money and send it to Ukraine, send it to migrant camps, you name it. Suddenly we can find money for that, but we can't find money to protect the American people. And that's what's so tragic.
Yeah, it's really disgusting because I remember hearing about there's those, they talk about bulletproof vests and people wearing it and it'll save your life. But I remember they had those, I believe it was called, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you know the terminology better than me, armored piercing bullets.
Correct.
Is that basically what you're saying about what what these guys are using with the cartels, with the rifles?
Here's it. I'm going to really give you all a lesson here real quick now. A Kevlar vest, if you look at a sidearm, take a 45, okay? You look at the bullets of sidearms, they're all rounded, okay? And their grain is much less. When you look at a rifle round, it's got a tip on it, it's got a point on it, and the grainage is 10 times full. So what happens on the rounded one, it hits the Kevlar, flattens out, and the blunt trauma is spread across the vest so that you still survive. Because see, people say, I thought they could do like a shirt that's made out of Kevlar. Yes, the shirt can stop the bullet, but if it doesn't have enough to stop the blunt trauma that's behind the bullet, you'll die anyway. That's like me hitting you repeatedly with a baseball bat. I mean, I may not get inside of you, but I'll break up enough stuff inside, you're going to die. So that's the difference is the concealable vest will only stop a sidearm because of the design of the bullet. It will not stop a rifle round because they'll go right through it. That's why we had to create with the titanium plates that will stop anything.
So, Mike, how is the weight for that? Because, obviously policemen are not just sitting on their behinds. If somebody comes, they might have to run, jump. And if it's heavy, it's going to slow them down a little bit.
Interestingly, in the old days, when we first started doing this in the Vietnam era, or flak jackets is what we call them. They weighed about 50 pounds a piece.
Wow.
Once we got into concealable vests, we got the weight down to about 5 to 6 pounds per side. That's roughly 10 pounds total, maybe 8 pounds. The active shooter vests are about a pound or two more per side. So instead of 8 to 10 pounds, it may be 10 to 12 pounds. Here's the difference. We have created new technology on the straps, how they are worn, their shoulder padding and all. You really can't feel it anymore. It makes it tremendously easy to be able to wear them now. So now that's a solvable problem. We solved that. What we haven't solved is Robert, go outside in 100-degree temperature and put you on a wool sweater on top of a t-shirt. You're going to sweat a lot more. I mean, there's nothing we can do about the fact it's going to be harder wearing a vest than it's not.
So how do you help out these cities and towns that, again, they cut the budget, but there's a lot of maybe active shootings. The crime is going up, as we stated throughout the interview, and basically every city and town in the country. Are you guys doing something to help them, or can people listening do something to help? through your Invest USA, or what can we do here?
A couple things to answer your question.
Okay.
First of all, because of the fact that we do so many vests across the country, we get them at wholesale. So, this is it's not we don't produce the vest. We're not making any money. We are using our leverage and representing all law enforcement to get the best deal possible. Second of all, when an agency doesn't have it, what we do, because remember, we have hundreds of thousands of people across the country that donate mom and pops $5, $10, $25, help take care of law enforcement officers. We provide some vests initially, and then we hope for the community to rally behind us and help raise the balance of whatever is different to make sure every officer has a need. It's interesting before, Robert, this is tragic for me to have to tell you this, but before it was on a first come, first served basis. You work for the agency, you need a vest, you tell me, I'll put you on the list, as we work our way up. Now we've had so many officers killed in the line of duty. I use this illustration. Last year, we had more officers killed in the line of duty than in history. Guess what? We're only halfway through this year. We've already busted that record. We're only halfway through the year. So you can
Wow.
see how fast it is escalating. So here is by direction. Here's the policy that we've changed. When an agency loses an officer in the line of duty, immediately we go to that agency and say, look, may not be able to fit your whole agency, but out of respect and honor for the family, for that man and for the family that gave the ultimate sacrifice, we want to come and donate a few vests to your agency in honor of him and ask the rest of your community, can you make sure that this is the last one that has to die that way in your area? And we're finding tremendous response.
How many organizations or departments are you working with?
We've got 13,000.
Wow. Okay. So quite a lot. What about the government, the federal government, the military? Do they have any dealings with you guys? Or
The military does, and here's what I'm laughing at.
okay.
Because remember I told you about the flak jackets from the Vietnam era? Why are they so big and bulky? Because their plates are ceramic plates. Remember I told you instead of the titanium plates, they're ceramic? Here's the problem that you have. Ceramic plates are bulky, they're heavy, and most people don't realize this, but if you talk for the military, if you've got a ceramic vest and you put it on the back of the Humvee and you throw an ammo can on top of it, you'll crack it. And then it's worthless. So, they love the titanium plates because you can actually roll a tank over a titanium plate and you won't even bend it, much less damage it. So that's why they're pushing so hard to be involved with us as well. But I can tell you this, we have more need than we can ever possibly dream about meeting, unless, of course, we decide to get some common sense back in government instead of funding everybody else. Take care of our first responders first so they'll make sure that they can come home safe to their families. Other than that, it's going to be a little while before we get everybody taken care of. But we're not going to sit back and talk about it. We're going to do something about it until that day comes. I tell people nothing will make me happier than to announce on your show, Robert, that every officer has a vest. We're going home. Mission accomplished. But until we do, until that is a reality, we're going to fight like every American should do to make sure we protect our first responders.
So you're getting more support, and the reason you're not getting support from a lot of communities is because they just don't have that money from the defunding the police, and
Right.
you don't have that kind of cash. But the military is full throttle with you.
They are. But here's the other thing. What is extremely interesting, and we're talking about law enforcement now, is we created a program. This was back in 1993. I was up with President Clinton was at the time. I joined him at the White House for a bill signing, and I was skeptical. They created a match program called BJA that, we will give you a percentage, a match of up to 50% for vets if you don't have any. You provide 50%, we'll provide 50%. The government has never done anything without screwing it up, okay? Let me tell you where the program is at today. Yes, they allocate 50 billion. How much of that is used? Very little. Why? Because here's what they do with the program. If you want to participate, Robert, you go out and buy your vest, okay? Then you submit your receipt, and then we will meet once a year, and then we will decide how much of you, up to, not 50%, but up to 50%, how much we're going to reimburse you. Well, here's the problem. If you can afford to buy the vest to begin with, what you need them for? I mean, it's a screwed up process. And that's just the way the government is. It screws up everything they touch.
Because wasn't there a time during the Bush administration where in Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of these men and women that were serving did not have that kind of equipment as far as vests?
You are correct. Here's what happened in that particular scenario. We launched an engagement. We launched an offensive, a war. Basically, is
Yeah.
what Bush did. And so we called up guard units. Well, guess what? Guard units didn't have that kind of equipment, and the active military didn't have the vest to be able to provide them. So we stepped up to the plate to help fill that
Oh,
gap. Because here's where we got involved. You're calling up guard members who happen to be cops during Monday through Friday. They'd only serve as a volunteer on the weekend, and I couldn't afford to let my brothers and sisters go into harm's way, not knowing that they had the equipment to try to have a fighting chance to come home. And so
yeah.
we were honored to do that.
Because that was a big story. I remember that all over the news. I was very young at the time, but I know families were sending equipment through the
Correct.
mail over to Iraq. I mean, it was kind of disgusting what was going on, but really sad too that the families had to pay into that. But anyways, just to kind of end the interview on this, can you leave us, Mike, with a little bit of hope? We've talked about a lot of doom and gloom here throughout the interview. It would be nice if you had a little bit of, even if it was a tidbit of hope for us as we end.
I'm happy to do it because I was already going thinking about that right before you asked.
Okay.
Everything we talked about, whether it was the soldiers that didn't have equipment in Iraq, whether it's our cops on the street, etc. Let me tell you one thing I want to make sure loud and clear for the American people. Never has there been a people in history, nor do I ever think there will be, the American spirit, who rally behind and care about their brothers and sisters. When it came to needing the vest in Iraq, the American people responded. When it came, you could go back in history. When World War II happened, when Pearl Harbor happened, it was the American spirit that immediately said, I'm here. What do I do? When it happened at 9/11, we were there at 9/11. When it happened at 9/11, what did the country do? This is bigger than New York. Where do we go? It didn't make any difference if it was California. I'll drive 2 days straight if I have to help my brothers and sisters. That is the American spirit. Quite frankly, folks, don't ever forget that. That spirit will be what carries us through in the days ahead. And yes, it's going to be rough in the days ahead, but never forget that the American spirit has always prevailed. We will prevail as long as we're united and stand shoulder to shoulder to deal with the evil that is now coming to this country. We can prevail. By God's grace, we will prevail as long as we stand together. Don't let anybody tell you to divide us. We are not divided. We are united as Americans who believe in freedom, liberty, and values and principles, and we will take this opposition of evil head on, and we will deal with it.
Amen to that. I'll tell you what, just going back to 9/11 before we hang it up here today, Mike, I missed that time. I mean, I don't wish that happened, but we were very much united. There was no, talk about racism, no talk about Democrat, Republican. People were driving around with the flags on their cars. They had the flag outside their house. Proud to be an American. Lee Greenwood. I know President Trump comes out to that song. Very big song at that time. George Bush threw out that pitch at Yankee Stadium. Down at Ground Zero, I can hear you. The terrorists will hear us soon. And I think our time for that was during COVID. But again, I thought that was going to happen. But because of the left in their hatred for Donald Trump, we never got to that. And we've become just as divided as I've seen. And it's almost like, again, just going back to the powers that be in the government, they want a civil war. They want us divided so that they can keep this control in this new world order, this world government. And, I'll tell you, 3 or 4 years ago, if I was saying this to you, Mike, I would have thought I was batshit crazy. But a lot of things changed within the past 3 to 4 years. But it's just truly sad that, and I hope we do get back to that point where we are proud to be Americans. We do put the flag outside our houses like, I do, and I'm sure you do as well, Mike,
Right.
and keep the flags on the car and really stand for the national anthem. The list goes on and on. But again, Mike, I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to having you on again. I do hope people go to Invest. It's INVESTUSA.org. This was Michael A. Letts. He is the president and CEO of Invest USA. Mike, we got to have you on again. It's not just about the vest. It's not just about your knowledge of the police. It's also about your knowledge about world affairs, the border, the intelligence agencies. The list goes on. And I'm so grateful you came on and told the viewers a lot of these great stories.
Thank you, Robert. God bless you. God bless America. United we stand, divided we fall. We will be united, and we will see great victory ahead.